George Buchan, secret correspondent to the Commission for Forfeited Estates. Who was he? The man credited with creating a predilection for agricultural pursuits in his grandchild. Born in 1682, George was baptised in Aberdeen, where his father, John Buchan, was regent of the university. He had an uncle, an Alexander Buchan, who was a merchant and burgess of Edinburgh. He had acquired bonds over lands in West Gladsmuir in December 1692, which may explain why some of George Buchan's letters are written from Longnidvey, which was in the parish of Gladsmuir. On the 25th of November, he married Anne Hay in Aberdeen. They had one child, John, while living at College Head between Gillen and Duralton. After the Union of 1707, the main source for salaried public positions was a career in law. For at least 3 generations, the descendants of George Buchan feature in exercising public office as lawyers, starting with George as Clerk of Commission of Teens. In February 1720, he is described as Clerk to the Lords of Session, when he granted the lands of College Head near Archerfield to his wife Anne. Like his grandson, there is no grave to visit at Edram Kirk near Duns. The family vault for 3 generations was incorporated in a reconstruction and is now hidden from view. An article has been offered to Berwickshire Field Naturalist Society. It is to be published this summer. In 1730, he acquired the estate of Kelloe in Berwickshire, which had belonged to a George Hume, son of Sir George Hume of Wedderburn, Town Clerk of Edinburgh, whose estate was forfeited in 1715. Other Court of Session records show that from 1718 he attempted to buy part of the estate of Cumledge in Berwickshire, owned by Sir William Coburn of that ilk, who had substantial debts. A separate series of records exists and shows that the Cumledge estate was disposed to John Buchan, his eldest son, on the 12th of February 1731. The income from the teens paid an annuity of £300 yearly to Margaret Mingus, George's mother, during her lifetime. By 1736, he had also acquired the estate of Lothian near Haddington and granted the life rent to John, son of his first marriage. Like Cumledge, Lothian had also belonged to members of the Coburn family, with their considerable debts in the mid-18th century. After the surrender of the Jacobite army on the 12th of November 1715 at Preston, 13 commissioners were appointed to manage the Forfeited Estates and set up an office in Edinburgh. An investment company called the York Buildings Company took on the initial task of purchasing 4 estates, one being that of the Earl of Winton, whose title and estate had been forfeited. The story of that company and management of some of the estates was published in 1883. The author, David Murray, disclosed that a George Buchan acted as a confidential correspondent to the company, and that he had acquired a 29-year-old lease from the York Building Company for the baronies of Seaton, Winton and Longnidvey at a rent of £1,500 per year. He also records that towards the close, the tenant had a profit from the lease of 1,200 guineas a year. After the death of George Buchan of Kelloe, his eldest son John Buchan succeeded to the lease of Winton Estate. In 1777, an Act of Parliament authorised the Court of Session to sell the remaining estates. George Buchan, George Buchan's grandson, was appointed by the court as factor. The estate of Winton was sold by auction to the Weems family. George Buchan Hebburn, the existing factor, purchased the baronies of Twynent and Cockenzie, which allowed him to have voting rights in county elections. Having married a wealthy widow in 1781, her name starts to appear in purchasing land such as property at Alderson, Garleton and Ugston. He managed to settle the Smeaton estate debt that he had inherited from his uncle. In addition, as the eldest son after the death of his father in 1760, the next three generations of Buchan Hebburns of Smeaton held the life rent for Kelloe estate until the mid-19th century. Presentation. This slide reveals the extent of the changes to the Hebburn family network in the 18th century. It had been an era when there were family disputes. There is evidence of people with the family surname of Hebburn having to leave their homes and set up new homes at Tinningham and Newbythe. It is possible they were Hebburns by adherence and service, a topic explored by Professor Donaldson in his book All the Queen's Men. The Hebburn connection at Smeaton survived when George Buchan adopted the surname Hebburn and led to 7 generations of Buchan Hebburns. Another observation at this time is a letter of 18th August 1725 from John Coburn of Ormiston to Alexander White, one of his tenants, which says, "The state of Scotland at the beginning of the 18th century was abject and miserable. The tenantry of Scotland, those of a few fertile spots excepted, had been nearly ruined by the calamitous seasons which prevailed at the end of the 17th century. Capital stock had thereby been wrested out of their hands, and the proprietors were still too proud, perhaps too ignorant, to interest themselves about the amelioration even of their own estates." End of part 2.